If you ever had to quickly gather information on a person or a company, whether it's for due diligence, OSINT, or security work, you may know how fast it can turn into a rabbit hole. Instead of manually checking dozens of sites, you can use a tool called SpiderFoot, which automates the process by pulling in massive amounts of available data, things like DNS records, subdomains, IP ranges, tech stacks, social media profiles, leaked data breaches, and hundreds of other sources. You can feed SpiderFoot almost anything like a domain, IP address, email, real human name, or even an organization, and then SpiderFoot will start connecting the dots for you. Before we get started though, quick reminder, everything you'll see in this video should be used ethically, legally, and only on targets you're authorized to investigate. Alright, with that out of the way, let's jump into the video. Before we can start collecting any information, we need to get SpiderFoot up and running. And for most people, this will be mostly copy and pasting a few commands. Although before installing anything, you gotta make sure a few things are in place. First, it's always a good idea to update your system, and you can do that with sudo apt update && sudo apt upgrade. Next, you gotta make sure you have Python 3.7 or newer, and also pip, which is Python's package manager. Now you can check both of these from the terminal using -- version, for example Python 3 -- version or pip -- version. If either command is not recognized, you'll need to install these tools first. Now we're going to follow the official SpiderFoot repository on GitHub. So you can go to this URL here, github.com/smicallef/SpiderFoot, and I will also put this in the video description below so you can just copy and paste. Now, once you're in here, scroll down to installing and running section. We will use the stable package release, so you can go ahead and copy and paste these commands right here. Now, what these commands do are essentially we download the stable SpiderFoot release with wget and then extract it with tar, and then we change into SpiderFoot directory with cd and then install the required Python dependencies with pip, and then finally we start SpiderFoot's web interface on localhost using port number 5001. If everything installs cleanly, you will see a message telling you to open http 127.0.0.1:5001. So you can simply open your browser and head to this address, which then you'll be able to see the SpiderFoot's dashboard. Keep in mind, on newer systems, if you run the pip3 install -r requirements.txt command, you may see an error saying that Python is using an externally managed environment, and it will complain that it was not successful in installing those dependencies. But the fix is simple. You would just need to use a virtual environment. Virtual environment is just a small isolated Python setup for a project, so everything stays clean and separate only for that project without affecting the entire system. Now, once inside the SpiderFoot directory, we need to create and activate a virtual environment. And to do this, we need to run a couple of commands. First, we run python 3 -m venv followed by the virtual environment name, which can be anything, but I will just put sf-venv, and then we'll just hit enter and it will create the virtual environment. Now we need to activate it by typing source sf-venv/bin/activate. Now once the virtual environment is activated, you will see the name of the virtual environment in your terminal prompt, which means you're inside the virtual environment. Now we can run the install command again, which was pip3 install -r requirements.txt, and that's usually all it takes to fix that problem. Now you can run the SpiderFoot by typing python 3./sf.py-l127.0.0.1:5001 and then go to this address in your browser. In some cases, I realized that even after setting up and activating a virtual environment, I would still see an error complaining about not being able to install some packages like libxml2 or libxslt, and then also it would say not being able to build wheel requirements. If this happens to you as well, just open the requirements file inside the SpiderFoot directory by typing nano requirements.txt and just remove the version numbers for lxml and also py-yaml, which is towards the end, and just leave the package name, so you would remove all those numbers which come after. Now once that's done, you can save the file by hitting Ctrl-O, then hit enter, then Ctrl-X to exit. Now you can simply run the install command again, and this should complete successfully. successfully. I'm not 100% sure on this, but I think this happens because those libraries are pinned to older versions, which don't always build cleanly on newer Python releases, but with this simple step, you can just fix that problem as well. Alright, now that SpiderFoot is up and running and you can see the dashboard in your browser, let's take a quick tour of the interface so that you know what's what. So right at the top, there's settings. This is where you can customize SpiderFoot and manage all the modules it uses to collect data. Each module is basically a different way SpiderFoot gathers information. Some of them look at DNS records, others check social media profiles, data breaches, IP addresses, technologies a website uses, and so on. You can also tweak settings for individual modules to fine-tune how SpiderFoot works. Each module comes with its own options, so you can adjust things like how it collects data, how aggressively it scans, or even how it handles certain types of information. This way, you can make SpiderFoot behave exactly the way you want for different investigations. Now, you might notice a padlock icon next to some modules. That means these modules require an API key or an account to access certain third-party services. So you will need to add the API key for those to work. And you can do that with the import API keys here at the top. But for modules without a padlock, SpiderFoot can usually collect the data freely from public sources without extra setup. Next, there's the scan section, which is basically where all your past scans can be found. You can go back, review results, or even rerun scans if you need to. Then we have the new scan section, which is where you kick off your investigations. Basically, you feed in a domain, IP address, email, or anything else you want to analyze, and then SpiderFoot will start pulling in all the available data it can find. You will notice that SpiderFoot gives you 3 different ways to configure a scan, depending on how much control you want and what your goal is. These are by use case, by required data, and also by module. By use case tab is the simplest and the most beginner-friendly option. Instead of worrying about individual data types or modules, you just tell SpiderFoot what you're trying to do and it handles the rest for you. You will see options like all, which enables almost every module. It's the most comprehensive option, but also the slowest. Footprint, which focuses on understanding what a target exposes to the internet, like domains, IPs, infrastructure, and so on. Investigate is useful when you suspect a target might be malicious and you want to check blacklists or reputation databases. Finally, passive, which gathers information without directly touching the target, which can be ideal when you want to stay as stealthy as possible. Alright, next we have the by required data tab, which gives you more control. Here, instead of choosing a use case, you select the types of data you want SpiderFoot to collect. For example, you can choose to focus on things like associated domains or IP addresses, email addresses, usernames and accounts, blacklisted infrastructure, and then SpiderFoot will automatically enable only the modules needed to collect those specific types of information. Now, finally, we have the by module tab, which is the most advanced and most customizable option. This tab lets you enable or disable individual SpiderFoot modules. And again, you'll see some modules have a padlock icon. So while choosing the modules you want to use, keep that padlock icon in mind. For this demo, I'm going to use the by required data tab, but you're free to explore the other options as well. Now, before we actually run a scan, let's look at the upper section of the page. At the very top, you'll see scan name, which is simply a label for your scan so you can recognize it later in the scans tab. You can name this anything you want. Right below that is scan target, and this is the most important field here. This is where you tell SpiderFoot what you want to investigate. One really nice thing about SpiderFoot is that it automatically detects the target type based on what you enter, so you don't have to manually select whether it's a domain, IP, email, or anything like that. And if you look to the right side, SpiderFoot conveniently shows you example inputs of what it supports. You can scan things like a domain name, an IP address, a host name or subdomain, an email address, a username, or even a real human name, a phone number, subnet, or a Bitcoin address. For this example, I'm just going to use a domain which I own, and once I give my scan a name, and enter my target and select how I want to configure the scan, now I can click run scan now and let SpiderFoot do the heavy lifting. So I'll just scroll down all the way and then click Run Scan Now. As soon as I do that, SpiderFoot will kick off the scan and then I'll be taken to the scan page. At the top next to the scan name, you will see the scan status, which will let you know if the scan is still running or if it's completed. Depending on how many modules you enabled, this could take anywhere from a few minutes to quite some time. Below the scan status, you will see the summary section. This is where you can quickly see what types of data SpiderFoot has discovered during the scan. And as SpiderFoot continues to scan, these data types will begin filling in, showing you all the different information it's gathered in real time. Now, right next to the summary section, you'll find the correlation section. This is where SpiderFoot shows how different data types it has found are linked together. And if you click browse next to the correlations, you'll be able to see a list of all the data types SpiderFoot has discovered and how they're connected. For example, you might see company name, email addresses, DNS records, phone numbers, country names, and so on. Each of these rows shows how the different data types are linked together, and you can click any of these to look deeper into the detailed findings, and you will start seeing a lot of really useful information here, like stuff that would normally take a ton of time to find if you were doing all of this manually. Now, next up is the graph section. This section is especially useful for visualizing how all the data points SpiderFoot has found are related. You will see nodes representing things like domains, IP addresses, email addresses, and you can follow the edges or the lines to see how they connect. It's a way to quickly spot relationships and patterns which may not be immediately obvious from a list of raw data. Now, if you click on scan settings, you'll find the meta information, global settings, module settings, and so on. These are basically the configuration settings used for the scan. And finally, we have the log tab, which shows you real-time logs of what SpiderFoot is doing during the scan. It will list any errors, warnings, or updates as the scan progresses, and it's a good place to check if you need to troubleshoot something. As you can see, SpiderFoot is a great tool which really makes gathering OSINT and doing investigations so much faster and easier. If you want to explore more, feel free to mess around and see what works best for your needs. The more you play with it, the more you will see just how much it can help you save time. And that's gonna be it for this video. If you found it helpful, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And as always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.